We're marching down a road to an early playable build of Overwatch 2. We know at the very least, pros will be playing on it in April, so that means there's gotta be a beta of some sort like a month or more before that. So that makes 3 to 5-ish months until Overwatch 2 really kicks up, with information on it probably preceding the beta even coming out. Based on everything we've seen, and at the very least what's been promised, I'm very optimistic on the whole of Overwatch 2, but I do have some fairly grave concerns that I hope Blizzard can address in our transition from the first game to the sequel.
But first, a message from today's video sponsor, Manscaped. As you guys know, I was a happy customer for years before they partnered with us, so it's a very easy recommendation. The main reason is for the Lawnmower 4.0, which has a host of quality of life features, but the most important one is the one that's gonna save your life, the skin-safe technology, the interior guard that helps keep your sensitive skin away from the dangerous blades. With Halloween coming up, you want to be the one watching the slasher movies, not living inside one. The Lawnmower 4.0 has a headlight on it and is completely waterproof, which makes routine maintenance a breeze. Get your trimming done while you're already in the shower. And now you can upgrade your shower game up one more level with Manscaped's brand new Ultra Premium Body Wash. It's a vegan formula with no dyes or harmful chemicals. But my favorite part about it is the smell. Masculine and clean. You're gonna smell good, your significant other's gonna like it, and you're gonna like it too. It smells great. And be sure to sign up for Manscaped's Peak Hygiene Plan. Either monthly or quarterly, you can get your refills sent directly to your door, no hassle, super easy. You're gonna wanna do this because you don't wanna run out of this stuff. If you're ready to dominate the shower metagame, take our link in the description to manscaped.com and use our new code OVERWATCH to get 20% off your entire order and free shipping. New code this time, just OVERWATCH, one word.
My first major area of concern is communication, with 3 descriptive words that Blizzard needs to improve on: frequency, quality, and accuracy. Let's go one by one. Every time Blizzard has a new Overwatch 2 drop of information, they always slip in, "Don't worry, we'll be more communicative in the coming months." And then just like my father, they walk out never to be seen again, which always leads us into these ruts of time periods where we're not really sure what's going on. And I don't even really consider the playtests that the pros did very much. And that's where I'll get to my second point, where the quality of information has been very, very light. This is the one that I think has to improve by the time we start to seriously take a look at the Overwatch 2 beta whenever that comes out early next year, because at the moment I still don't think anyone really has felt the impact of it being a sequel. At this stage, they don't want to overpromise something and underdeliver, so the things are vague, and so we'll just have to wait for that. But my last point, with the things they do tell us, I really wish they would improve the accuracy of how they speak. One of the most obvious ones over the years has been the term redefine the sequel, which after weeks and months of myth busting and research and analysis, I think I finally wrapped my head around, but most people still don't get what the heck they're trying to say. And it would behoove Blizzard to stop with the smug attitude that their high-minded ideas are just too brainy for the rest of the world to understand, and instead just plainly say what they're trying to do. I know that sounds harsh, but let me give you another example. Recently, there was an experimental card, which had a host of really odd balance changes. So weird that myself and many others asked the devs, is this like an Overwatch 2 pre-change where you're just testing out ideas that might work better in 5v5? Because that's the context that seems to make sense, not really making sense in 6v6. And the reception was so harsh that the community manager went over to the forums to explain the feedback that they gathered from the community and gave it to the developers. But getting to my core point about communication, something that I'm not going to accept from Blizzard is more community blaming, like a post like this, which, no offense to the new community manager, Andy, he's simply adopting the language Blizzard has used around things like this for years that we don't have to put up with. He said here, the community team has noticed a trend of confusion as to the purpose of the experimental card. We will be looking for opportunities to clarify the purpose with the broader community, with a goal of creating a clear understanding among players. This is the kind of thing of what I mean with accuracy. The community gets confused about the experimental card because your actions are confusing. You see, if you call something the experimental card, but then I would say, I don't know, 90% of the changes that get proposed on it go right to live without any discussion, and maybe even more importantly, any change of language in how you explain it, well, yeah, people are going to assume most of those changes are going to go to live unless you say that this is a test for Overwatch 2, like I assume it might have been. You could fix this really easy with your communication. It isn't our perception that needs to change because your actions repeatedly do the same thing. And sometimes I feel a little bit like a third party in this, where I know a little bit how the devs think, act, and speak, and I know how the community reacts and oftentimes does react inappropriately. However, to mediate these concerns, it's pretty simple to just outwardly state your intentions, developers. As in, this card is just to try this out. Hey, guys, do you like the idea of Junkrat having fall-off damage at range? I think a lot of players love that. What they don't like is him having a nuke at close range. That seems a little too strong, but maybe it's necessary for him to be relevant in Overwatch 2. Those are discussions we're gonna need to be able to have. This is the core of the communication issue for me. I know I sound a little fed up in this video, but I want you guys to know that I consider myself very fortunate to be able to isolate developers a few times in my career away from the cameras, away from the PR guys, away from all the Activision Blizzard publishing, and just get to know what they actually think and how they really think about the game. And I'll tell you, when you get them in that environment, it's amazing. It's like you're speaking to a human that loves the thing they're working on, understands that some ideas are good, some ideas are bad, some ideas have trade-offs, and oftentimes they have explanations for things that you never would have thought of. They truly do think outside the box, and I consider them geniuses, especially when you consider the wide hosts of asks that they're trying to fulfill all at the same time. Blizzard, as well with Overwatch as kind of the head game for them for a while in 2022, we got to get past that old Blizzard mentality, which resulted in a lot of the attitudes in those lawsuits where they kind of treat the developers as holier than thou and they're allowed to do anything. That doesn't just apply to their misconduct, but also in sort of the management structure and their communication. And that's how I get that smug attitude from the team overall sometimes, where they're not really allowed to admit a mistake. They just try to make it seem like it's your fault. I mean, I was told to my face, power creep is a player perception issue, and then they went to change it for the next 2 years. So most of the community praised them for doing that. It's like, you can't have both, right? You can't say the problem doesn't exist, then go to fix it and like, oh wow, look at the really competitive game we have all of a sudden. Aren't we clever? It's like, come on, can we be real? But okay, I don't expect that side of it to fundamentally change, but remember, they're under kind of a new management structure with Aaron Keller diversifying a lot of the responsibilities. So maybe we can get a chance for developers to kind of speak their own mind and be real with us as other game developers can. You know, 2022, different era for Blizzard. Hopefully no BlizzCon Online canceled due to the lawsuits surrounding that. Bobby Kotick is taking a major pay cut to try to set a new culture in supporting the employees. They got rid of a lot of people. So hopefully we're in a transformative year, and that veil of in-group secrecy where they can't talk about elephants in the room, hopefully that starts to lift with the rest of the transformations the company is making internally. In any case, we'll always be pushing for that and trying to be fair to both sides, the consumers and the developers. After years of little Q&As with them here and there, I feel like I've been able to slowly draw this out of them. I think that can be amplified if they're just more honest, speak more often, and say what they actually mean, as opposed to trying to be so guarded with everything they say. With all that considered, it brings me to my second major concern for Overwatch 2. When you add all this new content, rechange the game entirely, balance. But first, I want to say two things. One, remembering the core identity of what Overwatch is about, you should have no expectations of Overwatch 2 being balanced for quite a while. But what's a reasonable ask to try to get the dev team to push towards is something that I think almost every community member I can think of can argue as a good base point for balance, which is that heroes at least can shine on some maps in the pool that fit their style. Whether that be flank routes, long sight lines, tight chokes, every character can interact with that in a plus or minus kind of way, we know map-based balance is like the best place for Overwatch to be and helps pull apart the most entrenched metas a little bit, as you can start to see the gaps in any meta composition if it has to play in a variety of different map types. Or I should say map locations. Map types is a very important note to this balance discussion, however, because in Overwatch 2, we're losing Assault as a game mode, and what's coming in place of it is Push. This I'm somewhat concerned about because Assault has the most different map types of any mode, where there's more strict choke points and high ground positions because there's an attacker-defender dynamic all the time, and you play both sides. It's like the closest thing we have to like a set engagement style execution mode, like Diffuse or Search and Destroy. But the major takeaway here is that's a lot of variation that's just being removed from the competitive map pool. I'm struggling to see a world where maps are as significant as they were in Overwatch 1. You see, when you had 2 tanks and you had DPS characters that had all these extra abilities that we can expect them to somewhat lose in Overwatch 2, if the DPS class just can't crowd control anymore, it's hard for me to imagine us retaining a lot of the team comps that we remember from Overwatch 1. In fact, our entire concept of what a team comp is and how it functions in Overwatch 2 might feel entirely different. It'll be much closer to individual skill expression than it will be an interconnected series of parts that all need to give value to one another to work. In many ways, that makes it easier to jump in and play, but it also, I think, simplifies the top end of the game quite a bit. I'll give you an example. In the last 2 years of balancing, Blizzard did get into a momentum of creating certain team comps that were better on different maps. So much so that you'd have a team comp like Zen Brig with a Wrecking Ball that entirely plays around quick engagements around its damage. But then on the other hand, you have a Reinhardt-centered comp with all the deployables and disables in the game that you can think of to enable him. Immortality Field, Maywall, Symmetra turrets, and Teleporter, or even a McCree. We had a lot of options to plug in to reach the effect they were looking for. This meant a character like Symmetra, who can be weak in all manner of duels, can actually be very useful in a full team strategy like this, and I think makes it a little bit easier for them to balance, because if she doesn't have to necessarily win a lot of duels, there's lots of plays for her to make with teleporting the team around and setting up these deployables around her Reinhardt like the other supporting casts around him do. But in Overwatch 2, we're losing team comps like that, I think, to some large extent, because there's just no way that a character like Mei is going to be nearly as threatening if she can't freeze. If we use that Sombra rework as a template of what they're going for, DPS characters need to be able to deal damage, mostly. So although we might be happy to see a lot of the damage disable abilities that kind of just point towards you and win go away in the game, where Mei can't freeze anymore and McCree's losing his stun, I think Blizzard's really going to struggle to try to find a place where Mei has anything to do. It's this point that I think is really going to hit players like a truck when they're actually playing the game, but maybe doesn't show off so well in the gameplay they've shown so far. Comps like McCree, Sigma, Hog, and a Brig just don't exist in Overwatch 2. When McCree and Brig both lose their stuns, and of course you're losing one of those tanks, the way we build team comps is going to be undoubtedly more simple, which is good for toning down the game and maybe emphasizing individual players' skill a bit more, but it's FPS skill instead of the MOBA interaction skill set. The main problem that I foresee with balance in this regard is that we either have to A, change our expectations of what we want to see out of balance from the game, or B, add in systems to create diversity. So the first one, we may just as a community need to accept that certain top tier picks are going to be super dominant at different tiers of play. In Overwatch 1, I think we've grown accustomed to heroes being more gradual with how they perform at different tiers, with very few that fall off considerably at any area. But when you take out a lot of that MOBA balancing, well, you can't solve problems in the game as simply as like, oh, I'll just pick Mei and freeze the Roadhog in the front line. Or I'll pick McCree because the stun is an easy answer to get eliminations. Well, there just is less easy eliminations in Overwatch 2. And when the game is closer to being about moving and shooting, like a more traditional shooter game, the characters that can do that better are going to definitely shine the higher up you go. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing, but it's closer to early Overwatch metas where there wasn't all of these extra stuns and disables that they added through the years. And we either can A, decide that that's okay, and we're not going to see the big diversity of cast that we came to expect in like the last 2 years of competitive play. We don't really have any answers to this. And although I do have faith in Blizzard, I also have too much experience covering this game to think that they're somehow going to magically pull a rabbit out of their hat to balance the game so that straight up FPS heroes won't just dominate MOBA heroes when there's just less MOBA in the game. The benefit will be Overwatch 2 undoubtedly will be a more skillful game. The challenge they have to overcome with the balance is how are they going to make it a game with diverse strategies? I'm looking for them to explain how they're going to stop high skill ceiling heroes from taking over the game entirely. The other solution might be hero drafts. And I'm specifically going to start saying hero drafts from now on because Blizzard at some point just hijacked the idea of hero bans with their hero pool systems, and now people think those two ideas are the same thing. They're not. Another communication thing. Let's just not even get into it. Okay, we need a actual like draft mode in order to put competitive characters in check in the event that we don't get the glorious map-based meta that we have. It's better to start talking about this now before the game comes out, because despite Blizzard saying this is an impossibility, a thing they could never add, and it does all these other problems, the truth is Blizzard never really addressed some of the major problems with their core game philosophy. One of the main ones being Overwatch is a game about swapping heroes to counter the enemy. But competitively speaking, that just means you easily can pick the most optimal comp all the time. Best case scenario, we get the map meta that we spoke about, but worst case scenario, it means picking something off meta is just harder because the enemy is never locked into a strategy. They always can just pick a more optimal comp easily. And then, of course, there's a lot of detriments to hero swapping with the ult economy. You're playing on a clock, you have 4 minutes. Why swap your comp 3 times and get 0 to 1 ultimate if you can keep the same comp and the right one from the start and get 2? At least. It's simple math the way that works out. It really deters experimentation with this idea that you can swap in the game while the clock's running, and realistically on a competitive level, if you walk out on comp A and they're on comp B that counters you, the best thing you can do is walk back to spawn and swap to the thing that won't get rolled by what you're playing against. All this is just really silly. It doesn't exist in other games. This is a major competitive pitfall that, among many others to be honest, but maybe the biggest one for me, that until Blizzard gives communication about Overwatch 2 in this regard, I'm going to keep hammering it home as being a massive problem. You shouldn't be all excited to play a game of Overwatch just to walk out of spawn to realize the enemy massively counters you and then lose objective time, lose map control, and just basically feel like you're losing the game just from that hero select process. Blindly picking heroes can't be how it goes, which is why I use the term draft now instead of hero bans, because I think bans got a lot of people confused. The way a draft works is there's 32 and maybe like closer to almost 40 by the time Overwatch 2 is really up and running. We know at least, I think we're getting 6 heroes at launch, so that makes it 38. A few months into its life already, we're going to be near 40. All right, I already think 32 is a lot of heroes for this game. People always said we don't have enough heroes. I mean, that's nonsense. Every hero has a different style of play. It's like you're playing 10 shooter games at once. Undoubtedly, by Overwatch 2 time, we're going to have hero overload, right? What a draft does is a competitive phase prior to the game to select who you're going to play. I have opinions on this. I would rather we don't have mirror picks, for example. Some people think they're necessary, whatever. I think it's like the bane of the game competitively. Nothing more boring than mirroring a pick in this game, but even if we have to have them, selecting out ahead of time the heroes that are going to be in play for that map stops all this problematic go to the choke, realize you're screwed and just lose and have a bad time gameplay that Overwatch can be. And that's at all tiers of play. And that's before we even say the word hero bans, right? Just a way of picking out the heroes that are going to be in that map. Now, the draft can have bans, but the idea of being able to freely swap among all 40 heroes at any time with no restriction ever is just a really casual way to play the game. And it does work casually, mainly because if you don't put a lot of time in the game and you're, say, like in gold, just knowing like a few gimmicks on a character interaction might win you the game. If you know Ana can sleep Roadhog, but you never play her, and the enemy Roadhog is rolling you, well, if you just try to sleep him when he's on the flank, maybe that's enough. And that can feel really empowering. There's lots of interactions like that work, where you try to pull out a pick that you're not necessarily that confident in just to try to solve a problem your team's dealing with. That's a cool part about Overwatch. But as players are more experienced, that's not how it plays. That breaks down really, really quickly at all ranks, in my opinion, but especially the higher up you go. Either because the mechanical execution you need is just too high that you can't really swap off your core competencies of heroes, because you're going to be putting so low value out overall that even if you make that one play, it's like whatever, right? I don't think that's too difficult to understand. It's like, even if you do sleep that Roadhog, if you miss everything else for the rest of the game, should you have just like dodged the Roadhog as the character you play better? Making impact plays matter, but overall output does too, averaging over the whole match. And even a slight trade-off in that can utterly lose you the game. So the concept is like a cute idea, but it doesn't competitively work. Not to mention there's a like double snowball problem, where if you do play a comp that is getting countered, you start working towards your ultimate, then you're left with a really tough decision. When you're fighting in a disadvantaged matchup, but let's say like you're losing 40% of the time, right? Just enough to not win. Again, like 4-minute clock, you're down to 2 minutes. Really, you just got to get that ult off. It's very rare where it's a better idea to play through a game and lose ultimate progress or even your ability to cast it, to swap to a better hero that's better in the mid fight, because ultimates are so much stronger than mid fight abilities that you might as well just try to use your ultimate better. Again, see, the logic of this is unintuitive. It's counterintuitive to the expectations of what an average player would have set by Blizzard. And we have to decide, is our game about that average player experience, or do we have a competitive mindset to what we're doing? These are a lot of harsh questions that I think over the coming months, we better have some answers to. Like, it better not be, oh, here's Overwatch 2. We tried some different respawn timers, and here's a robot guy you push around. That's the new PvP. Like, no. These are a lot of credible concerns that need a lot of communication to explain how they're handling. And I just think we've got the tip of the iceberg so far. I think they can do it. I just don't want to feel like the sequel is a downgrade to the meta variation that we've had the last 2 years. Like, it would feel really bad if Overwatch 2 is an amazing PvE. I think that's a given. But let's say the PvP feels like a more simplified, watered down version of the game. That's not what we want. And I think that's like the early impression of the little bit of what they've shown us so far. And admittedly, it's not much. They admit they've got tons more to do, which brings me to my final point of a concern of Overwatch 2 is the content. We don't know what they really have, how much they're doing, or what it's going to look like when it's going to be done. All we know is we'll have a playable version in April. It's concerning that this close to the deadline, there's phrases being said like, we're going to rework basically every hero to fit in 5v5. In that time? You haven't done it yet? What do you mean? Okay, in their defense, of course, what they would have done already is what Metro had leaked, all the new content. So the new maps, the new heroes that they're not showing us yet, all that new stuff has been developed from a mechanics point of view. It exists behind closed doors. What doesn't exist is how the heck they're gonna balance it to reach an aim. And let's be real, they have to get serious community feedback on balance anyway. It's unfair to request them to balance the game, competitively speaking, in a closed test environment. That type of thing they can't really figure out until they release it and we really start to dig our hands in and we know more about these interactions. It also does seem like a dramatically short time window for them to be like, how do we make McCree not useless if he doesn't have a stun? That's where I think things like the mid-air roll comes in, when they, in their internal build, are dealing with things like Wrecking Ball being way too strong, as they've admitted. It feels like half of the characters need to get reworked, which almost is like reinventing all the characters. I'm a little concerned on where they're at with that, though I will admit, this also gets in the communication angle of this as well, because I don't know if people even realize how much more is left on the table for them to do. They did this again at the original BlizzCon reveal of Overwatch 2, where they showed a PvE mission and everyone's reception was kind of like, oh, that's like a normal just campaign game, kind of cool maybe. Let me know when you have more. But in the Q&A panels, they went at length to explain, no, we want this to have endless replayability. We have lifestyle games, I think they called it. So they're definitely developing complex RPG systems to match. Well, on the PvP side of things, I think we got that same impression where the pro playtests had these different maps with no new heroes and a rework to 2 characters that are kind of like boom bust type meta picks. They removed a bunch of characters off to the side that they were still working on that the pros couldn't play, and then we got like the new map. But that looks like a much more watered down version of the game than the game ultimately will be when they add all the new heroes and rework like everything. It's hard for us as the community to get the oomph of that, imagining how everything's going to be changed. I think we'd all just be a bit more confident if we understood the timetable of these things. This early version build of Overwatch 2, should we expect everything that Overwatch 2 PvP is going to have to offer? Probably not, right? But what percentage is reasonable? Will we feel like Overwatch PvP 2.0 will roll out a year from then to be at near 100%? We don't really know what to expect. And it's concerning when we don't know all the other content that's coming with it. You have a thing like clans, which seemed to be accidentally leaked at BlizzCon Online. How many features and systems are going to be attached to Overwatch 2? The type of stuff that we've been begging for years. I think along with the new heroes, those are the things that usher us into a new age and feel like it's an actual new game. It would have been nice to have that added to PvP all this time, but I'm confused when I should expect those things, I guess. Realistically, those concerns are probably above balance concerns, because balance can be, fixed with a draft phase, and to some degree may never be fixed based on the format of competitive play. But it's this currently unknown feature set for Overwatch 2 that I certainly hope has been in the works, in lieu of them like reworking all the heroes and stuff, but they still have to do. Okay, we've talked for a lot in this video, had a lot of concerns. I know many of you share them as well. I wanted to cover all of them so that we can sort of plant a flag in the ground that we can look back to and reflect on as the continuing communication comes out from Blizzard into next year, where I think it's really going to ramp up. But for now, though, we'll keep a light on for you in the Overwatch community until things start to get real serious. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave it a like. And don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon next to the subscribe button to get notified directly to your cell phone when our videos go live. Be sure to check out Manscaped, the sponsor of today's video, linked in the description, and use our new code OVERWATCH to get 20% off your entire order and free shipping. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. We'll see you guys next time.